So the way this will work this evening is, as you were recording the session, and I'll pop it onto YouTube once we have finished going through everything. Might not get up onto YouTube until tomorrow or the day after, but it will go on YouTube eventually. I've just muted everyone. So if at any point you've got any questions, if you could please just type them in the chat box, and then we should see that come up, and then we'll answer questions that way. And what we'll do is there is some time at the end to ask questions. So if you've got a burning question which comes up as we run through this, please do say so, or type so, and otherwise we'll talk about the questions at the end. So what we want to run through this evening was give you the confidence to join in club racing. And that for me is the biggest thing from this evening. Is it's not about the minute details of the rules. It's not about, you know, rule 18A versus rule 18B or anything like that. I just want to give people the confidence to come down and join in the racing club. It is good fun, and we do try and keep it as simple as possible out there, so that it is as enjoyable as possible. Give you that basic knowledge to give you that confidence to join in as well. And of course, next week we've got the slightly more in-depth rules chat when we will start looking at some of the slightly finer elements of the rules, and take that knowledge to the next level. But for tonight, I just want to give you that basic knowledge so you can actually just give it a go. And finally, hopefully, a bit of myth busting. So what I'm really hoping for is that as we go through, some of the myths around club racing and how racing works, we can get rid of them, so it's not this enigma, it's not this mystery anymore, and you will want to come and join us on a Wednesday evening or a Sunday. So the main bits we're going to look at, and there are quite a few here, but not in too much depth on any of them. So the different types of racing you'll see going on at the club, and what you could join in with. How a race is organised, so you know what to expect when you turn up. How the race starts, so how you actually get across that start line and get going. We are going to look at some of the basic rules, which should hopefully be familiar to most people here, but we will look at a few of the basic rules just to give you an understanding there. Everyone breaks a rule at some point. I will hold my hand up to having broken rules in both races I did this year, and I know other people here have made a little mistake. Also, what happens when we do? Finishing the race and what we need to do at the end of the race. And finally, just how to join and what to do on the actual day you come to do a club race, what to do when you get there. So, types of racing, very quick skim over here. So the first thing we've got is fleet racing. So this is something we only do a couple of times a year at the club, and it's when everyone is in the same boat. So for here example, in this picture, we've got lots of lasers. So when we run, say, the laser open or the solo open, that's when we just have lasers or solos or toppers or whatever racing, and they all race against each other. And because you're all in the same boat, it's nice and simple. First one across that finish line wins the race. Very, very straightforward. But as we all know, not everyone at the club sails the same boat. And actually, normally we might have a race with 20 or 30 people in the club, and there's probably 10 different types of boats out there. So we've got a couple of different ways we can organise that to try and make it as fair and fun as possible. So first of all, you've got a handicap racing, beautifully illustrated by the photo here, which I think we took in August at the club. So handicap racing is when each boat's assigned a handicap, called its yardstick, and you all start at the same time. So you all start together, and you all race round, and the times are recorded, and then some clever maths are done on those times as you finish to sort of correct them for whether your boat is one of the fast ones or the slower ones, to give us a sort of result of who is the winner of that particular race. So it's something you can get round. You don't actually know your position, whether you've come first or second or third or slightly lower down the fleet for some of us, until the guys organising the race have actually done the maths on it. There's another way you can handicap a race. It's pursuit racing. So you're still all in different boats, but this time the start is staggered. So you all start at individual times based upon the boat. And in theory, if every boat was sailed to the same standard, you'd then all finish the race and cross that finish line together in a photo finish. But because we've all got slightly different abilities and tactics and so on, what happens actually is we all finish at different times. And in a pursuit race, it is the first boat across that line would win. So it's nice and simple in that sense to know how you're doing as you come towards the end of the race. other types of racing you might hear people talk about, particularly at Spinnaker, something we are quite well known for is team racing. So this is a whole different kettle of fish. We're not going to talk much about the team racing tonight, but team racing in effect, the most common form is you have 6 boats racing at once, a team of 3 against a team of 3, and it's your cumulative score. So just because your boat comes first, the rest of your team are 5th and 6th at the bottom end of the fleet. The other team will actually do better on points because it's about how the whole team scores. So it's something we run a little bit of at the club and we'd like to do a bit more. So what we're going to talk about tonight really doesn't apply to team racing. It mostly applies to the fleet, the handicap, the pursuit, the sort of stuff we can do very easily at the club and you can do in your own boat. So what we've got is how a race is organised. I'm hoping I can make this bit work now. If I can view the chat. What I'd like you to do for me is we've got a variety of people we need to get these races to happen. So in the chat box for me, if you could please now type in some of the names of the roles you've heard of people using in racing. So there's different jobs people do. So if you could type into that chat box for me, what some of those things you've heard of, that would be really good for me. Where is the chat box? I want it. Fantastic. So coming up here, we've got the race officer, we've got the safe photographer, love that. The umpire, that will keep Tom happy, results coordinator, assistant race officer, catering officer. Yes, someone for tea and coffee. The race committee, fantastic. So all I'm going to do is move it out of the way for myself. So got loads of really good answers there. Some of the ones I've got on here. So we've got the race officer, so the person who's actually going to be leading the race, running that racing for us. What I've then done is I've clumped together our assistant race officer, our recorders, our timekeepers. So these are the people who've got a few extra jobs to help that race officer out. So if the race officer, the man in charge, they might, or the woman in charge, I should say, you might then have an assistant race officer. You might then have a recorder who's got, the clipboard recording the positions of everyone. You might have a timekeeper who's keeping on the clock and doing the flags and the countdown signals. And the idea is to spread the load by having a few people there. We then, of course, also have our safety crews. So people out in the safety boats making sure we will stay nice and safe out there. Someone mentioned the umpires. So particularly in team racing, we very often have an umpire who's there to sort of make sure the rules are followed out on the water. Not something we have very often outside of team racing, but it is a role that there is. And of course, someone else said for catering. So yeah, the person for tea and coffee, which is always one of my favourite people at a race. I think the most important thing to remember out of all these different roles is the race officer for me, because it's the race officer who has actually running the racing. They are the one who makes decisions about things like what the course is. And so actually they are the person who can give you the most clarity in that sense. We then also have some sort of paperwork or some supporting documentation, as I like to say when I get all posh, about how the race will run. So again, we've got various different bits of paperwork in the background for racing. So again, in the chat box, could you please just type in for me some of those different bits of paperwork or documents you might have heard people talk about in relation to racing for me? Tom's got our sailing instructions. Anyone else heard of any other bits? So we've got the sign-on sheet, the notice of race, excellent. The rule book, very important, Robert, definitely. Okay, so if I click next. So we've got the racing rules of sailing, or the rule book, as Robert so brilliantly put it. And the latest racing rules of sailing actually got released last month, or came into effect last month. You've then got the Our Way of Racing Charter, which is basically a document the RWA put out there saying, let's all play fair. will follow the rules, good sportsmanship and all that sort of stuff. So we do have a copy of that at the club. We then have 2 documents which are about how the actual individual race is organised. So you've got the notice of race, which is sort of the announcement of race is going to happen. Now, generally as a club, we sort of do this once a year or once in advance of a regatta, and it sort of lays out the basics about how the race will work, who's eligible to enter, bits and pieces like that. We then have the sailing instructions. Now, we've got a standard set of sailing instructions at the club, which are available on the club website, and this lays out how the races will run in a bit more detail. Now, at a club, we tend to have, our sailing instructions get written for the year, and then they're available, and we just use one set for the whole year. And for some of our special events like the Laser Open, the Solo Open, the Topper Open, and so on, we then write a special set of sailing instructions just for that event. But what's really important is that whilst it might be that notice of race and those sailing instructions which sort of explain how things happen, and if in any doubt, the person I would always go back to is the race officer and say, look, I'm not sure what you mean by this. What should I be doing? Because then you'll hear from the person who's running it how they want things to happen. We also had Steve mention the signing on sheet. So traditionally in racing, we'll go back to 2019 and earlier here. If you entered a dinghy race, what you'd have to do is before you went on the water, you'd go up to the race officer or one of his assistants and you'd fill in a little form saying, my name is James, I'm in Topper with sail number 44753, and you'd put the time you went on the water. And this told the race officer who was in what boat and whether they'd entered the racing. And then at the end of racing, you'd come off and you'd sign on the line, say, I've come off the water at 3 p.m, say. Now, this was all fantastic until in March they announced social distancing, and suddenly us handing around a piece of paper and a pen with lots and lots of people suddenly wasn't such a nice idea. So temporarily what we did as a club is we just said, we won't do signing on. If you cross the start line just after we've said go for a race, we'll call that you've signed on. And we've got a list of everyone's sail number at the club anyway. And if there is one boat we don't recognise, we can just go and find who it was after the race and work out results that way. Some other clubs are experimenting at the moment with electronic sign-ons and technology and things like that. It's not a step we've taken just yet, but it could be coming in the future for the sign-on sheets. So that's a bit of background about how a race is organised. Let's check, we've got no questions in the chat box just yet. No, fantastic. So we will carry on moving forwards. So what we can talk about now, as we know a bit about the background, is we're just going to move on to the racing itself. And so here we've got a lovely picture of a simple race course. And we've got our big yellow boat here where my mouse cursor is. You can see that, which is our committee boat, or the end of the start line. And to keep things nice and simple with the pictures this evening, I've assumed we're starting all our races out on the water without using the race hut. So we've got our committee boat here, where the race officer and some of his assistants would be. We've then got our start line. Got a number of boats waiting to get ready for this start. And then we've got our windward mark, the first mark, normally up here. And on this course, we just go around it in a nice little triangle and straight back up through that line, which would also double up as our finish line. So that's just what a simple race course would look like. And so we're going to talk now about what happens at the start and how our starts work. And what I'm not going to talk about at this point is when you come to start your race, you want to be in this position at this moment in time, and you've got to think about this. What I'm going to run through here is actually how the countdown works and what happens in the lead up to someone saying go for your race to actually start. So there's various countdowns which people use to start these races. The 2 most common ones are 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 1 minute go. So it's a 5-minute long countdown with some extra bleeps or horns or cannon sounds at the 4 minutes and 1 minute intervals. What we actually use at Spinnaker Sailing Club, and which is getting more and more common, is 3 minutes, 2 minute, 1 minute go. That way it is nice and simple. And it's also slightly shorter, so you can squeeze in a few more bits. So at as the countdown starts, either a 5-minute or that 3-minute interval, we'd have a horn sound or some sound signal. If you go to posher clubs, they get nice little cannons with starting pistols and so on, like you get if you're doing a race in athletics. We've got an air horn, and the first flag will go up. And depending upon the race you're in and what boats are involved, the first flag to go up may change. It's normally the class flag. And the flag I've got on the screen here, the pennant, that's what we would normally use for most of our club races at Spinnaker, as it's our handicap pennant. And then we go to the next sound signal, which is either at 4 minutes in the 5-4-1 go system, or it's at 2 minutes in 3-2-1 go. So you'd have another sound signal again, and the next flag would go up, which is normally the preparatory flag, which is this blue square with a white box in the middle of it. Now, this is the usual flag. Occasionally, if people keep starting too early, people might use other flags in place here. But generally speaking, as a club, we normally only really use that preparatory flag, and if that's what most people start off trying to use when they're running the racing. You've had the second bleep, and now you might have a little bit of a wait till you get the next signal, which will be at the 1 minute. And at this point, again, that sound signal and the preparatory flag would come down. The last minute goes through, and as you can probably expect at this point, the class flag would come down, and that's it. Everyone goes as that class flag drops. And off you go. And what I should say at this point is that the sound signal is there to draw our attention. It's that flag going up or down, which is the actual sort of important signal. The sound just tells you that a flag has gone up or down. So don't assume you've heard a horn and that means you can go. We always need to check what those flags are doing, as they are the actual signal of the start of the race. And this is how you'd start that race. If it was a fleet race, so you're all in the same boat, just racing against each other, nice and straightforward. Or if it's that handicap race, the Portsmouth Yardstick handicap, where you all start together and you all go at one point, the countdown would run like that. But if it was going to be a pursuit race, the staggered starts, obviously it's slightly more complicated. And when I say it's complicated, you've just got to remember how many minutes after that start you go. So, for example, the slowest boat in the fleet would go at the first go, and if you're in a slightly quicker boat, you might get told you would start 2 minutes later. And so after that, class flag is dropped at the go, there'd be a horn every minute. And so you would, in theory, need to count how many minutes have gone past that you know the correct moment to start. Now, most of our race officers at the club are nice. When we run pursuit races, we've got a loud hailer. And what they'll do is they'll actually say, that was the 1 minute horn. That was the 5 minute horn, to try and help people to know when they're meant to be starting, to give people the best possible chance of having the best possible race. So that's how our pursuit race starts. It's still nice and simple. And if you're in any confusion about how the race sequence would start for an actual race you've entered, you would either see this on those sailing instructions on that notice of race, or as I said, just go and talk to the race officer before the start, find out exactly what they're going to do. You've had that go, and now we want to start our race. Now, we've got our start line here, and in theory, at this point, some clever animation will happen, he says. Not quite, oh well. Oh, where's it gone? There we go. So we started that race. Let's go back. We're going to start racing, in theory, just before the go. This is the position you want to be in, just behind that line. So as soon as go goes, you're off, you're across that line, and you're off racing. But if we go a little bit early, as this boat was, it's not the end of the world. Normally, and the standard is if you're over the line early, all you've got to do is, as we can see here, stop playing. I'm going to wait for it to get to a certain point. I'm going to pause the animation if I can. There we go. Hopefully that's paused it. There's this boat's done at 1. It's gone across the line at 2 a little bit early. So what's done is at 3. It's ducked downwind. And as you can see, 4 is completely on the correct side of that start line again. And then it can restart. So if we do go a little bit over that line early, it's not too much of a problem normally. We can just duck down, making sure we avoid any of the boats which didn't start early, and then recross that line to start our race. Occasionally, if you're at larger races, or if people keep starting too early and the race officers get a little bit annoyed that everyone's pushing their luck a bit too much, trying to be off a bit too early, they might ask you to do something slightly different, whether it's to loop around the end to restart or something else. But generally speaking, at club racing, you just dip back below the line and then head off. So we start in our race, and this is the bit which sometimes people get a little bit worried about. So we just have a start, and as people head up, everyone's going in different directions, you're going different ways, you're all zigzagging across each other. What do I do? Who do I have to get out of whose way? Can I just go? What do I do? So what we're going to look at now is some of the very, very basic rules to help us at this point. And then I'll give you some top tips at the end of what to do if you're a bit nervous, you're a bit unsure when you're actually out there racing. So the basic rules. We'll just rattle through a few here. Rule 14, Rule 15, Rule 16, 10, 11, 12, Rule 20. And if you're feeling a bit like my favourite gorilla here, and you're a little bit confused about all these numbers, do not worry. You might hear lots of people in the boat park talking about the different rules and their different numbers. I'll be honest here, I'm terrible at remembering the numbers, but the rules are actually quite that simple. So what we're going to do for now, we're going to forget about the rules, and we're going to talk about some real basics and what they actually mean, these rules, whilst we're out there racing. So Rule 14, avoiding contact, or as I like to think of it, avoid crashing. And what this means is that in racing, if you have right of way, and another boat should go out your way, but they don't, you cannot just plough through them. You need to go around them and then complain later, basically. But just, we shouldn't think, you know, I've got right of way, I'm going to plough through. Someone hasn't got out of our way, we need to move around them. One, it's what the rules say, but also it's protecting our own boat. So we haven't then got to fix our own boat. So, you know, there's a little bit of self-preservation in there with that one. Rule 15, acquiring right of way. So when we gain the right of way, we must give people the opportunity to keep clear of us. So we can't suddenly cut someone up as if we're in a certain make of posh car from Germany traditionally and say, you must now stay out of my way. We've got to give people the opportunity to stay out of our way if we gain right of way over them. Rule 16 is very similar. As we change course, we must give the other boat room to keep clear. So people must have the opportunity to keep clear of us as we are manoeuvring around the race course with right of way. Finally, Rule 31, which wasn't on the other page, is touching a mark. So what we shouldn't be doing is touching any of the race marks and committing, as we said, around, we need to go around them, not sort of through or across them. Or as I like to think about, just don't crash into anything whilst you are sailing around out there. So what I'm going to do now is look at 3 more rules, which are just really nice and basic. And actually, although they're the basic rules of racing, they are also the basic rules of sailing, and hopefully everyone here today will have already heard of them. So Rule 10 is beautifully illustrated here by these red and green boats. So this is the on opposite tax rule, and it's also known as port and starboard. So if any of you done your level 2 recently, your stage 1, 2, 3, 4, any of those courses, you should have been taught the port versus starboard rule. And it's just the same in racing as it is in normal sailing. So here we've got the green boat is on starboard, the red boat is on port. The boat on starboard tack, where you're sat on the right-hand side, the starboard side of the boat has right of way. And so the port boat has just docked out of the way. So that's all we are talking about in Rule 10. It's nice and simple. It's nothing new, hopefully. So move on. Rule 11. So we've got a blue and a yellow boat this time. So on the same tack, overlapped. I hope that's paused it. So as we see here with 1 and 1, they're overlapped. There's, you know, they're just overlapping. They're going the same way. And as we come forwards, boat 2 has given way and not pushed into the other one. So it's the windward leeward rule, as you would have been taught this on your start sailing course or similar. So again, nothing new here. Now as we move forwards, the final right of way rule we're going to talk about is Rule 12. On the same tack, not overlapped. also known as the overtaking boat, keep clear. So again, as we see here, we've got the yellow one and the blue one. Blue one is clearly behind the yellow one. So as they've gone forwards, it's the blue boat has got this burst of acceleration. And so instead of just going up the back of boat two, it's gone around it and it's kept clear of it. So there's nothing to stop you going over the top to keep gaining their wind here, but the blue boat as the overtaking boat has kept clear there. Now, what we're going to move on to here, which is rule 20, which is a slightly odd one, but it's very, very relevant for us at the lake. So this is room to tack at an obstruction. And so this is assuming we're heading towards a fixed obstruction. So for example, this line where my cursor is now, that's the edge of the lake, that's the lake bank. Got the yellow boat is coming along here, and it's got this blue boat next to it. And what the yellow boat wants is room to tack away, but that blue boat is blocking it. So the yellow boat can actually ask for room to tack. And so the yellow boat must ask for it. The blue boat doesn't have to assume anything. The yellow boat would ask for it, but once that yellow boat has asked for it, the blue boat must respond in some way. And it can respond either verbally or just by tacking away. That's here. So the yellow boat at sort of 2 would have asked for room to tack. The blue boat here has responded by tacking, and then the yellow boat's got room to tack. Keep clear. The important thing is this doesn't apply because you're running out of room because there's a mark in front of you or there's a boat in the way. It's only at what's known as a continuing obstruction. And so the best example of that is the lake bank at Spinnaker Sailing Club. So just going to briefly find the chat a second. No questions, fantastic. So next bit is, what if I break a rule? And as I said earlier, everyone does it at some point. Everyone will make a little mistake at some point. It's probably accidental. It really, really doesn't matter. Because racing and sailing is a self-policing, and I don't like the word gentlemanly at this point, but it's how a lot of people describe it. So it's self-policing. We're meant to enforce the rules by ourselves without it going off to, umpires and judges and juries and things like that. We want it to just be nice and friendly. So we've got the option to exonerate ourselves. And if we do exonerate ourselves, it's as if that rule was never broken. It's gone. And we do that through a penalty turn or penalty turns. So if we break a rule, we do the appropriate penalty, which we'll talk about in a moment. And that's it. Everyone forgets this rule break happened. Fantastic. But if someone doesn't take their penalty turns, there are other ways to have rules enforced. And this is through either a protest or arbitration. And this is effectively where the protest, you say protest, and you say you've broken a rule and you've not taken your penalty turns. And if the person does the penalty turns, then again, everything's forgotten about. It's all forgiven. But otherwise it goes off and there's meetings, it's like a mini court case ashore. So it's not something we generally encourage. We want people to take their penalty turns and do the honourable, the sportly thing and exonerate themselves. But there is a route forwards. Fortunately, within club racing, protests and arbitration, it's relatively rare. I think we had one protest at a club race this year, but generally speaking, you do your penalty turns and then that's it. It's gone. It's over. The rule break never happened in theory. So you will either have to do a 360 turn for your penalty, which is one tack and one jibe continuously. And you do this if you bumped into one of the marks of the course, for example, normally. Normally then, if you fail to give way to another boat because you've crashed into that boat or they've had to take avoiding action, you'd have to do a 720-degree turn to exonerate yourself. So you do a big loop of one tack, one jibe, one tack, one jibe, and then again, as I said, everything is forgiven. However, what I'm going to ask in a moment is Tom to confirm something for me, which is, Tom, if I am right, we've at Spinnaker, we are only doing a 360 turn for any rule breaks or infringements this year. Am I correct?
You're correct. We only do one turn. If you
Thanks.
admit you, yeah.
Thank you. So at Spinnaker, because we want to try and keep it as simple as possible, if you break a rule, you just do that 360. So just one tack and one jibe, and then you carry on. But like I said, hopefully there won't really be any rule breaking out there. It'd be fantastic. Moving forwards, finishing the race. Let the animation go a little bit further a second. There we go. So finishing the race, generally speaking, the finish line is the start line. So the line fulfills both functions. And if we look here, we've got the blue boat and the green boat. Now at point 2, or time moment 2, the blue boat's bow is just nudged the line. Green's still well behind. But blue's not completely gone through the line. It's sort of said, oh, I'm there, and then it's gone away. Green has just carried on until by the end the boat has completely crossed the line, but it touched the line later. Just in the chat box for me, can you please type in whether you think blue or green actually finished the race first? Cool, so we've got a few answers for green there. I'm very, very glad to see that the person who I would hope knows the rules better than anyone else as the umpire has put blue. And it is, in fact, the blue boat here has finished first. You do not need to cross the line in your entirety to finish the race. All you have to do is have part of your boat cross the line. So blue would actually have won this race if that was them both finishing together. And Tom has put that blue fouled green after finishing. Possibly if I play the animation through, Tom will see if blue did foul green. Did it work? Yeah, blue probably did foul green through my poor finishing. And so Tom's raised a really important point there, which is once you have finished the race, you have to keep clear of all the other boats racing. Pause that again there. So once you finish that race, you need to then keep clear of everyone else racing. It doesn't matter how you do that, whether you just keep sailing up the course to get clear or you just go off to the side away from the line, but you must keep clear. Otherwise, as Tom said, you will commit a little rule break there. So that is what I wanted to actually talk about this evening in regards to how a race works and how you can take part in what you do. So it is really simple, and I really want to stress that at this point, that is how simple racing can be. And certainly at a fun club, it's Wednesday evening after work level, I'd love to keep racing as simple as possible and as accessible as possible. But if you are a bit like my friendly gorilla earlier, what if I've already forgotten everything? And I know this is the sort of question which will be running through some people's heads at this point of, what if I've forgotten everything when I turn up racing? What if I forget it all when I get there? My first thing, guys, is just turn up. Just turn up 20 or 30 minutes before the race if you're a bit nervous. And then speak to the race ops person running the race, a class captain, the person at the club who looks after your class. So the common ones I'd say worth knowing is you've got Keith, who's the class captain for the lasers and the toppers at the moment. Obviously, we've got Tom as a sort of acting Firefly class captain at the moment, as well as his rear Commodore sailing role. We haven't got an Oppie class captain at the moment. We'd love to have an Oppie class captain. Got Jay, who's our sort of handicap class captain. So with Jay, if you've got a boat which isn't a laser, a solar, a Firefly, or a topper, Jay is the man to talk to when he's there. And otherwise, on the solos, it's sort of a combination between Nick and Paul is the vibe I've had recently. But please speak to the class captain or one of them. Doesn't matter if they're your class captain or not, or just one from Oxford Racers. I am sure they will give you advice. They are all very, very friendly people, and they're all always happy to talk things through before you go racing. And if you're really feeling nervous, don't worry. Think back to when you learned to drive. For those of us who were sort of slightly older, or for those of you who haven't yet learned to drive, I know there's a couple of you on the this evening. If you've not yet learned to drive and you're worried, you can get your L plates later. But for 2021, we're going to have some streamers. The idea is they'll be available in the race hut. And if it's your first few races or you're a bit nervous, you can come and ask for a streamer, you can tie it onto your boat somewhere obvious. And then what that streamer is doing is telling everyone else who's racing is, I'm slightly new. It's like having your L plates back on your car. And hope this is the idea is this people will be a bit nicer to you, will give you a bit more space out in the water, might even be a bit more forgiving to you, give you a bit more space and give you benefit of doubt on times. But at the same time, I'm a bit new, I'm a bit nervous. Please be nice to me to try and make it a bit nicer for you out there if you're a bit more nervous, give you that confidence to get stuck in. And after the race, have a chat with people. If you're like me and you bring the thermos flask and coffee down with you, have your coffee, depending on what the social distancing and the gathering rules up to, have a chat with people after the race. See what tips people might give you. Ask how they found it out there. Learn from the other people in the club, because that's going to be really important to help you gain that confidence and to get stuck in as you go forwards. And then, assuming you've never raced before and this talk has hopefully inspired you to come down and join in and have a bit of fun with us racing, a couple of tips I'll give you. Go with a friend for your first race. So if you and one of your friends don't race much, but you both sell aces, go together, because you can help each other out of working out what's going on the race course, but also you can almost forget about the rest of the races and you can just race your friend. So it doesn't matter whether you came 24th and 25th out of 25 boats, have a little bit of a fun race between yourselves just to see how it's going. When it comes to starting the race and you see, 15 other boats lining up on that start line, ready to be across the line as soon as possible, but you're a bit nervous, don't worry. Just hang back a little bit. Start slightly after all the more experienced people. Let them get out of the way. And then you've got a nice clear run of that start line. And the other advantage to that, of course, is if you're not quite sure which way to go around the course, you can follow the boats in front. And as long as most of them go the same way, you could follow them. That'll give you a really good idea of where the course is if you're worried about remembering what the race course is. Take it easy. Don't push. If you've got you and another boat there pushing in at the same point and you're not sure what to do, don't worry. Ease off a bit, or if in doubt, just give way. It's better to sort of give way and have someone go past you a bit and it stays nice and fun rather than it all getting a bit crowded. So just have fun is my final tip. Just enjoy it. Don't worry too much about your results if you're new to racing. There's people at the lake who've been racing 20 or 30 or 40 and will stop at that point years. Yes, they probably will go ahead of you. So don't worry about it. Just have fun, enjoy yourself. And over time, you will find yourself working your way up towards the front of the fleet just through having fun and getting more experience that way. And that's it from me, that what I want to pass on. What we've got a bit of time now is, I'll stop sharing screen in a minute, is we have got a rules chat next Thursday where those who want slightly more in-depth knowledge or to find out a few of the other rules you might have heard, things like room at the mark or a few of the other bits, we're going to talk more in depth about them next Thursday. But now we're going to stop sharing. But hey. And this is the opportunity for some questions. I've just seen one from Steve there. Does it include spinnaker pole? I think pole doesn't count at start. So Steve, is this saying, does your spinnaker pole crossing the line count as you starting early?
I was asking about the finish, but yeah, both. I wanted to know.
Yeah.
I'm ready. Does it count?
It does. It's part of your boat equipment, so that would count. And going back about 5-6 years to the America's Cup, that was one of the reasons one of the boats removed its spinnaker pole, was to shorten its length overall. At the finish line, the spinnaker pole does count if it's in its normal position for the point of sail. So,
James?
Yes? You want to jump in there, Tom, with something even more technical?
It's just changed in the latest rules.
It always does this to me. What's it changed to?
It now says hull.
Oh, does it now say hull?
Yes.
Fantastic.
So I'm sorry, and I'm just trying to work out whether that applies at the start as well, but I'm not sure.
So
But it's a very good question from Steve because it has actually changed, and I don't know if you've got snub bowsprit on a racing boat, you know, a J boat or something like that. I don't think that counts either, and I can't remember what it says on wings on moths and things like that. But it has changed.
it has changed. So it is the hull that counts. Fantastic. Thank you, Tom.
And so that also means it's not crew in the normal sailing position either. It's just the hull.
Just the hull. Brilliant. This is why we have Tom as an umpire.